Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the LNG Just Covered podcast, where we talk to key stakeholders, advisors, and business owners about their views and opinions in the intermediary space. My name's Wayne.
And I'm Hazel, and today we are joined by David Mead, who owns Futureproof, which is a very key business within the protection space. So David, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hi Hazel, hi Wayne. Thank you very much for inviting me. Brilliant to be here.
It's a pleasure. So we'd love to find out today, David, a bit more about your journey and how you kind of came to develop Futureproof into where it currently is. So where did it all start for you?
Crikey, that's a long way back. Okay, so I joined the industry in 2000. So, sometimes good things come out of tricky situations. So I'd been made redundant. I'd been working marketing in Switzerland, and I was made redundant in back end of 1999. I was looking for a new career, I think, probably at that stage, and sort of fell into financial services. You hear that a lot, don't you? So I became a mortgage advisor. And then that obviously then had protection attached to it. So that was in 2000. And I spent 10 years in that role and began to specialise more and more in protection. And then in 2010, post-Lehman's, things got a bit tricky and I looking for another way forward, really. I wanted to specialise in protection. And so I formed Futureproof in 2011. Protection only specialist, had zero intention to grow the business, literally. So myself and my wife Sarah started the business, and that's how we started off, really. Just protection, life, critical illness, and income protection in all its forms.
Amazing stuff. And obviously we're a mortgage advisor with protection alongside it, David. What drew you towards protection? Because obviously you ended up there.
Well, it's challenging for a start. So, it sounds no two clients the same, obviously, but also the whole protection process is challenging, isn't it? And the placing the case and underwriting and all the sort of bits that move in protection. So that bit, I suppose. I suppose the obvious answer is because you're having a real impact on people's lives. And I've been in the industry obviously quite a long time now. I've dealt with many, many claimants. And the more claimants you deal with, the more it reaffirms my commitment to protection, because you can see the difference it makes to them or their families' lives. And you really do see that on almost feels like a week-to-week basis. So, yeah.
Absolutely, and it is incredible to see that business has grown since 2000. Especially when you didn't have the intention to. I actually just literally found out that was your background in marketing. I didn't know that about you until just now. Where do you think there's been any joint skill set there? Do you think that background in the kind of marketing piece has helped you with your business and how it's grown?
Well, I guess so. As you know, I think you're the expert in marketing. For me, it's just about how do you get your voice heard when in a really busy market, and when there's two of us in Futureproof day one, and there's you two and a website you've put up and not much else and a few connections, then how do you get your voice heard? And I suppose there's a lot of repetition and being prepared to put in the hard yards in terms of constantly going to events, making sure that people are aware of you, putting out social media things, whatever it might be, and just working hard with your clients to hope that they will then refer their friends and their family, and just doing all those things. But probably the biggest thing we made in terms of marketing was a gap we saw probably at that stage in protection, was that most people, it's a sort of one and done situation in protection. So they go to the advisor, they get what they need, and they never hear from anyone again, including the provider in a lot of cases. So, and they're paying their monthly premium. But the problem with that is a few years down the road, they're looking at their bank statement and going, what's that £50 a month for then? And they literally are going to forget, is that my home insurance, my pet insurance? What is that? So what we put in place with some nice bit of tech that we've got is allowed us to put out a statement, a digital statement to our clients that they receive every quarter. So it reminds them of what policy they've got, who's covered, how much they're covered for, how long it's covered, what it's costing, how they can claim, all of those sort of basic things. And so every client since day one has been receiving one of those every quarter for the last 13 13 and a half years.
And that's quite
There's
revolutionary.
a lot of emails that go out. So what that meant is, A, they remember you. They come back to you if and when their circumstances change rather than going to someone else. And then secondly, they need to make a claim. They know you're there for them. There's maybe a gentle reminder that if the policy isn't in trust, that they should be, and what the reasons to do that are. So we get a very high percentage in trust. And I suppose ultimately that just plays through to high retention rates, and that's one of the things we've managed to achieve over the years. So.
And that's one conundrum, isn't it, for distributors out there, as to how to make sure that their brand is top of mind of their customers. So, as Hazel said, pretty revolutionary, upfront, innovative, early on, in the last few years with Consumer Duty and all that type of thing. Obviously, that's come to the fore, but you were doing it long before. You've obviously seen the benefits in doing that, and customers presuming are remembering future proof. They're coming to you from a claims perspective. I appreciate maybe not all of them do, but a lot of them are, and it's getting your brand in front of them, 4 times a year.
Yeah, 4 times a year, and we send them a printed version of that, a letter once a year as well. So it's actually 5 times a year. And remarkably, because we've never changed the subject line, it always says something like your policy statement or something like that. And once in a while we sort of play with it and the open rate plummets, so then we go straight back to where we should. So people have become familiar with it. Our unsubscribed rate, so bearing in mind, some of them 13 years ago has received 52 versions of that over the years. Unsubscribed rate something like 0.2% or something. So people seem to appreciate the open rate's about 50%. So people seem to appreciate receiving it, even if they don't always interact in terms of contacting you. They're not they're not unsubscribing, and they're not. It seems to have real value. But as I say, the biggest benefit to us is retention rates. People are reminded of the value of whatever it is they've bought, and
that's crucial, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Protection, because as we've spoken about before, that intangibility of it, and you can't test drive it like a car, can you? Until something happens in life, when life happens to you. Interesting times when you were there. It was just both of you in presumably the back room or wherever you were.
Yeah.
How did you start then? Were you using your mortgage book of customers? Did you start with those? And then how did you move on to sort of different areas of lead provision? You mentioned referrals as well, which obviously is very important.
So referrals, networking, that sort of stuff. Yeah. There was a real pivotal moment, and which is why there are no longer just 2 of us, is that a big provider came to us within the first year, and they had an issue around orphan clients. That's clients that they've issued policies for, but the distributor who arranged it maybe isn't around anymore, no longer has an agency. So they were concerned that those clients weren't getting the right type of service, and particularly if their circumstances changed. So I was asked if I'd be interested in managing those orphans on their behalf, which is one of those moments in life that it was a fantastic opportunity, but also set us some challenges because there were many thousands of them. So suddenly 2 people wasn't enough. And I was lucky enough to work with my colleague Alex Clancy, who's since retired now, and other colleagues who joined us. And in fact, one of your co-podcast guests, Amy Whittingham, who's been with us about 12 years. She was our first ever advisor, and so she joined us then, and she was sort of as a result of that, I suppose. So so there's a combination of things that happened.
Queen of claims, I will remember interviewing Amy. That was a great episode.
Great stories that she had. I mean, I say great stories because the impact of claims and how it can help customers financially. Obviously, a lot of those claims aren't great circumstances, but great that she's been able to help them and so future-proof.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great stuff.
And in terms of the journey you've been on, obviously there'll have been, you've mentioned one challenge was getting that recruitment and kind of building the business around, that quick influx of business. If we touch upon that referral piece, because I think there are sometimes as well the challenges with advisors thinking, or partners, thinking, why would I refer for protection? I want to keep a hold of this for myself.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that, and how have you seen that evolve over the years?
Well, okay, so that was the other. I suppose there's been 3 sort of big moments in our evolution, and the most recent of those was 6 years ago when St James's Place were looking for a way to help their partners or advisors write more protection or facilitate more protection. So it must be the same in mortgage advisors' world as well. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of information. If you're a mortgage advisor, you're dealing with 50, 100 different lenders, knowing lending criteria, rates changing all the time and so on. And of course, it's the same in wealth, pensions, investments, there's a lot of information you've got. So when it comes to protection, quite a lot. Keeping up to date with the information you need to be able to give great quality advice and then to execute it in terms of pre-underwriting, understanding underwriting rules, how does the application process work, back office support in terms of dealing with GPs and medicals, all those bits and bobs is quite daunting for a lot of people and time consuming. So SJP were looking for a partnership that they could those partners who weren't able to write protection themselves could refer it to a specialist, someone who's going to be able to take it from there, as it were. So we talked about that, and then it became an acquisition. So Futureproof was then acquired 100% by St James's Place. We set up an internal arm called St James's Place Protection Planning. And after establishing, of course, what we didn't know is how many would wealth advisors trust us enough to refer their clients. We could see the size of the opportunity, but it doesn't mean that people are actually going to use the service. And so we spent a lot of time making sure we got our positioning right, going out and spreading the word. And Alex and I spent a lot of time out there talking to partners and so on. And we've never forgotten that if someone is in the wealth side of the industry is referring a client for protection advice, this isn't a transient relationship they've got. They've often had that relationship for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're looking after funds under management. It's a big statement of trust to trust us. We really appreciate that. So when a client's referred, then we do everything we can to treat them as they would. Anyway, so we had no idea how well it was going to work. So there were bits of tumbleweed blowing around the office for quite a while. Where's our first referral? But then it started, and those 2 advisors became busy, and then that became a 3rd advisor and so on. And now there's about 27, 28 advisors in that team. And literally last week we received our 25,000th referral, which was great. Wow. So a really big landmark. So it was great.
Amazing milestone.
Yeah, it was great.
And like you said, that trust element is absolutely huge. It's a real partnership, isn't it, with the wealth advisors and then others that are referring into you because of the fact that I think we talked about it before, didn't we, in terms of, for them, they may be friends. They become friends, haven't they, as well as clients. So when they see them, they want to make sure they're getting the right level of service and the right type of advice.
Yeah,
so
100%.
You must have countless stories and anecdotes around with existing partners that you've built up over the last sort of 6, 10, 12 years or whatever with regards to that.
Yeah, so St James's Place have got about 4,800, 4,900 partners or advisors. 2,700 of them have now used the service. But it is a step-by-step process. So the first referral is you can almost feel someone's heart in their mouth a little bit when they're going, right, well, I'm going to refer this client. We've explained, the journey, what they should expect, but nevertheless, it's a bit of a leap of faith, isn't it? And so there's that. The communication between us and them is really important, that we keep them up to date with what's going on, how the client's progressing, if there's bumps in the road, what they're likely to be and how we're managing them and so on. So that communication piece is really important. And I suppose, from our perspective, our goal is to win the next referral every time. There's no point in someone referring once and then never using it again. Most wealth advisors will have a couple of 100 clients, something like that. So presumably quite a lot of those clients will need some kind of protection advice at some stage. So our job is to win enough trust and faith that they'll be prepared to use us a second and a third time. And what happens then is once people get into the rhythm and the habit of it is maybe not such big scrutiny on what's happening next, because they know what's happening next, and hopefully by then they know they can trust us to do a good job.
It's like anything, isn't it? You've got to experience it first, to test drive it, see what it's like.
That's right.
In terms of the advent of consumer duty and changes with the regulator and stuff like that, have you seen, I suppose, more advisors switch on to protection maybe?
I mean, as we're seeing with legal in general at the moment as well, there's no doubt there's a lot more protection interest we're seeing across the whole of SJP, because my other hat is the head of protection for SJP now, and we're seeing the amount of partners generating quotes themselves for their clients going up a lot. The amount of quotes they're generating is going up a lot, and and subsequently the amount of business that's being written across the whole of SJP is up a lot. I think we're up 27-28% this year so far, which is great. So I think that's mainly been driven by consumer duty. That at the end of the day, this sort of write it or refer it approach is like, there are many thousands of clients that are going to need advice. The question is well, do you do it or do you refer it to a specialist who can help you and do it? But what I think we're hoping to eliminate is walking past that conversation and doing neither. And that's the bit. So from a consumer duty and helping to avoid foreseeable harm, I think that's probably, we're playing into that. Of course, we weren't to know that 6 years ago when this was set up, but it was still the right thing to do. Yeah,
definitely. And you've got that, you talk about the trust and relationship piece, you've got that with all the different providers, haven't you, as well? You look at the close collaboration that obviously we have and you have with the others as well. The training that's provided and how we work together in terms of trying to really put protection out there as a platform for people to say, okay, this is something that needs to be taken seriously with regards to clients, whether they're mortgage clients, whether it's protection of ultimate goals, dreams, and aspirations in retirement, cash flow modelling, whatever it might whatever it might be. I think that relationship, when someone refers to a firm and deals with a firm like yourself, it must give them some comfort that you've got those amazing and great close relationships with the providers out there.
It's built over time. It's vital, absolutely vital, because we're all part of that chain, aren't we? So you've got the client, the needs being identified by the advisor, they've decided to refer. So now that our bit in that advice is identifying the need or confirming the need, providing the information for a client to be able to make an informed decision. They go ahead, we then apply, what happens next, and underwriting processes, servicing generally, doctors, everyone plays a part in this journey for a client to get covered. And as we know, that can be quite problematic and challenging at times. So our relationship with you guys and with other providers is absolutely vital in that, because it all reflects, I suppose, on the partner's trust on us. Because if it takes 3 months to get a case through, we don't expect people to understand why it's taken 3 months, but sometimes it does take 3 months, right? So the harder, the better the communication between ourselves and yourselves and providers, the better we can give feedback to the partners so they understand what's going on and that we're not just taking our eye off the ball. Things are going on in the background.
Exactly. It's all about context, right, isn't it? Because sometimes you said you'll get cases which are really straightforward and simple, and I guess even when I was advising, you then get a case on your desk with everything under the sun that you think, okay, this is, or maybe they've still got outstanding documents from the doctor, bits and pieces and that to me is where the specialism comes in, isn't it? Because I guess from a partner advisor's point of view, really busy seeing their clients, doing all their kind of reviews, thinking about the assets under management, that pension planning. Would they really have the time to then, if they had someone who's waiting on outstanding medical diagnosis, et cetera, to know, as you've said before, exactly where to put that case and how to get it through?
And there's two elements to that. One is the sort of pre-sales element, because if you're an occasional advisor around protection, you write 1 or 2 cases a year, the information you're going to have is naturally going to not be as up to speed as it could be. So things like knowing, well, where do I go for pre-sales? How do I know that the client's condition they've mentioned to me in the fact-finding process, is that going to cause an obstacle? If so, what's that going to look like? Is that going to cause a loading or an exclusion? How's the client going to react to that? If we've gone through the whole journey and 3 months later we tell them that news, that's probably not going to land very well. So the best thing to do is to get it all up front, know that if it's going to be loaded by 50%, we've had that conversation with the client at the get-go. They've bought into that and they understand and the rationale's there. So when we do get to the end of that journey, there's no nasty surprises. It's not to say there are never any, but trying to eliminate them as much as possible.
Of course you do. And it's interesting, if you're an advisor sitting at the front there, you'll signpost, because you've got that trust anyway, and you know you've got that professional process going on with that close relationship with the providers, the pre-underwriting teams, all that type of thing. You're going to signpost that with your client on referring you over to Future Proof. They're going to do this, this, and this. The benefit of that is that, and that. And then push them across. Obviously, I know it's a leap of faith the first time they do it, but the ones that are multiple, got that multiple referrers to you, relationships over time, must really see that, and it must be real solidified in the cases that you've done.
I hope so. And I think just to pick up on the sort of second element of that was what happens once the case has been submitted. Then has the wealth advisors firm, do they have this the staff with enough knowledge internally to go, right, okay, so a doctor's report's required. When should we phone the doctor? At what stage should we start phoning them and chasing them for the return of that report? If, for example, there's a bit of toing and froing around the payment for the report, which happens, then who do I go to? How do I resolve that? So all of these little elements mean that you've got to have a back office staff who know what they're doing as well, and have the time and the resource to be able to do it. So we've got an amazing team in this St James's Place Protection Planning team and in Future Proof, and a part of their job is to, once the case is submitted, to get it through to terms. And that means talking with you guys, talking with doctors, talking with clients and partners and everyone else, keeping everyone on board, keeping the whole thing locked in. And that can go on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so that takes a lot of time and resource. So it's having that as well. And I think that can be one of the other reasons that some specialist advisors in other fields find it difficult to engage with protection on a consistent basis. So. Yeah.
I'm thinking of, you mentioned earlier, it's that kind of habitual, you mentioned the word habit. And what I'm hearing in all of this is you're making it easy for the advisor to have a good habit of write it or refer it, because that's a simple decision to make.
Yeah.
You're then making it easy for your team to have good habits because you've got the right expertise in.
Yeah.
So then naturally it's obviously easy for the customer to keep that habit of their payments up, because again, you've put quarterly plus that written letter out to them. So I don't know, just that's coming to my mind a little bit. It's all about those small little habits that you do each day that have accumulated to this, to really the success that you've had.
Well, I think so. I mean, some things, like everything in business, you try something sometimes and it doesn't quite work out the way you hope. But yeah, there's no doubt that repetition, consistency, focus on great quality service. So the mantra within our firm is treat every client as though they're a member of your family. So that isn't just like be friendly. That is, which you hope you are with your family. But it's more about the ethical approach you have to this. Is if that's your mum or your sister or your brother that you're advising, what would you do? How do you want them to walk away from the conversation with you every single time? And that is, I'd like to think if you phoned any of my colleagues up and said, what's the mantra? That's what they repeat back to you, because I think that then underpins everything that we do in terms of, right, let's try and do this right. And remember, that could be your mum that you're doing this for. Yeah. So you're going to fight hard to get the right cover in place as quickly as you can.
It makes you think of the outcome, doesn't it? Yeah. Not just on when they walk out the office. It makes you think of the outcome 3 years down the line.
Yeah.
Or 5 years down the line.
The claim. And go back to that bit is the difference we make when a claim comes through. I always remember one particular claim, and it was how important claims are, but there was one moment, and I've been in Future Proof, obviously I was advising alongside Alex and Amy and others in the early days, and a client phoned in and I happened to answer the phone, and she couldn't talk for about 15 minutes. She was in floods of tears. I mean, genuinely. And her husband had just passed, and she was trying to ask, what do I do? How do I get a claim going? But she just couldn't get the words out. And you just realise that, what we do is not going to change that. It's not going to change that situation. But at least all she was worried about is obviously paying for the funeral, paying the bills, those things, practical things. And she'd sort of gone into automatic mode. And our job was to try and help her achieve that as best we could. So, and that, those conversations are in our industry happen every day, don't they? So you guys have just paid out £1 billion in claims last year. You're literally having those conversations your claims assessors every single day.
It's a tough job.
It's a tough job.
A really tough.
It really is.
I think as well, as an advisor, you don't ever forget your first phone call like that. I mean, I can remember mine, and it was the same. It was a lady whose husband had died literally that morning, and I was her mortgage advisor, but I was the first person she phoned because her mortgage payment was due in 2 days' time, and she was just beside herself, not knowing what to do. And fortunately, we'd done the right thing. The cover was there, but you just think you'd hate to pick up the phone one day and actually they've cancelled it, or the right thing hasn't happened in that conversation.
Exactly. And people think of that in the terms of bereavement and death, but of course, the big area of success within our industry at the moment is income protection and the rise of income protection. I'm just so pleased because ultimately everyone sitting in this room is dependent on earning an income, right? And if your income stops because you get ill or you have an accident, then that can lead to all sorts of problems. So we've got a client who, as you know, we've got an SJP event in a couple of days' time, and a guy we've helped with a claim who we helped arrange his cover because a partner referred him, and then he subsequently claimed about 16 months later because he had a nasty accident, bumped his head on the seabed, and was paralysed, lying face down in the sea. And luckily someone spotted him and supported his head and got him out and got him into hospital. So he spent 6 weeks in a coma. This guy was 33, self-employed, and 6 weeks in a coma. And his dad phoned up and told us about the claim, and so we helped with that. And luckily, we'd arranged income protection and a critical illness policy. So the income protection started paying out quickly. So day 30, it starts paying out, which means that, not that he was conscious to worry about his mortgage payment, but his family were. So that meant that that was covered. And then about 6 months later, under one of the conditions under the critical illness plan, big sum was paid out, which then meant that his mortgage was paid off and a lump sum in addition. And I spoke to Joe last week because he's coming to our event in a couple of days, and the difference is made to his life because he's had to learn how to walk again, to a certain degree, how to talk again. There's long-term impact on him. I'm pleased to say he's making a great recovery, but what he's not been doing is worrying about money. And that's our purpose, right, is make sure that he can focus on getting better at physiotherapy and all the things he needs to be working on.
And you can't even comprehend how stressful that would be in the first place, let alone in also the financial burden on top of it. When we spoke in our last set of filming, again, similar story with one of the guests. They'd personally been in a car accident in a coma and then actually had a stroke whilst they were in the coma. God. So they said it, and again, early 20s, was it? At that point they were, it was like in their 20s. Yeah. And they said that it's taken the time to get the holistic cover and, obviously working to budgets and things, but imagine you had nothing at all just because you didn't have that time spent looking at all the different options. Yeah,
and most protection advice is there's a compromise somewhere in there. So you've got your ideal world, but, rarely, to be fair, do most people go, I'll spend that £700 a month on the ideal advice. So the skill of an advisor is finding the compromise, explaining what those compromises are. So in Joe's case, it was a 2-year income protection policy, not a full-term one. But that allowed him enough free money to then be able to invest in critical illness cover, which means ultimately his mortgage is being paid off and an additional lump sum as well. It was a good level of cover, so he had hospitalisation benefit paid out as a result of that. And so, it's just finding that compromise, and I suppose some cover is better than none, but he had more than some cover, but for anyone, some cover is better than none.
The value there, we talk about this a lot, don't we? Demonstrating the value of advisors, and from those particular scenarios where the partners referred them in, it's the value of that package, I suppose, that collaborative advice approach. They referred to you as the protection specialists, and you've done what you set out to do. And certainly something I know that I suppose at the event on Friday you'll be promoting that, and you do it all the time. Yeah. It's so important. As we mentioned already before, in that particular guy's scenario, of all the different costs and stuff and all the stress, you just can't comprehend it, can you?
No, you can't.
What you're going to go through, and whether that's a customer who seemingly has got a huge wealth portfolio, that might be set aside for something else. That might be, they might have those dreams and aspirations for them. They're not going to be thinking about, I'm going to draw on that if something happens, are they? So you must have countless customers that referred in that regard too.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. From a wealth advisor's perspective, is the mortgage is an easy trigger for protection advice, but frankly, it's so much more than that, as we've just been explaining with Joe. But Joe's just one person in many hundreds of thousands, where it's more than just about the mortgage. So in a wealth advisor, you spend years helping a client build up funds under management and plan for their future and for their retirement and all these bits and bobs. So if you're in Joe's situation, what's the first thing you're going to do after you're able to? You're going to start drawing down on that money. In this case, at £1,600 a month, which his income benefit was. I don't know, I can be sure he wasn't saving £1,600 a month, so you're drawing it down much quicker than you were saving it. And obviously someone who's a bit younger probably hasn't built up that much in the first place. So you're going to get through those funds really quickly. But if you're using something like Voyant as a wealth manager, then just take a year's cash flow out of that plan and see what impact that has. It's significant.
It's scary, isn't it?
We've done, because we even looked out, even when something catastrophic hasn't happened in your life, we have done some research, haven't we, where people, they overestimate how long the money they've got in the accumulation is going to last, don't they, Hazel?
Yeah. Now that I'm in the annuity space, we see it all the time. People are not realising how long they've actually got to live and that pension's got to last. And in a great way, medical enhancements have been brilliant for us all. But what it has meant is your money runs out far quicker because you're living far longer. So the bit that I find interesting in the wealth space, especially we have some wealth advisors or partners who will say, well, my client's got X amount of money, they've got plenty wealth, they can just draw on it if anything bad happens. But again, if we look at the volatility in the market at the moment, is it the right time to be drawing that money out? And how does that impact, again, the total value of those investments? And that's where protection can really underpin for a really small, and again, even if we look at that full package, for those clients, it's a small percentage of their total wealth, really.
Absolutely. And that's what wealth advisors, I suppose, comprise. They need to find is, it's one of the pillars of financial advice is protection, right? Is one of them. And so is helping a client set aside a bit for what happens. Because I guess it must be great to talk about all the things, the future, what it could look like by investing in, long-term investing and what the future could look like. No one really wants to talk about what happens if it all goes a bit wrong. Really.
And why wouldn't we protect it? Because this is a lovely thing to talk about.
And helping them just say, okay, well, I know you want to invest for this, but we need to have a plan just in case, a just in case plan, and setting aside £100 a month or whatever it is for that is money well spent if you ever need to claim on it. Of course, it's a complete waste of money if you don't, but none of us know that. So that's the whole point of insurance, isn't it? You don't know what's going to happen.
You're right. So it's that next step, though, because I guess as a financial planner, advisor, whatever they call, everyone's got different names for what they call themselves, but you're talking about the risk of stock market crashes. So you diversify, don't you? You diversify the portfolio to get rid of those risks. It's really easy, in my opinion, really easy to just add on what if your income goes? That's another, it's just an extra risk, isn't it?
It's almost it's a risk assessment conversation again, isn't it? Your risk in that regard. And a lot of your investment might be, you might have built up a business like you've done personally, David. It's the business protection side. Do you want to protect that as well as the portfolio side of things?
Absolutely. And, that's our biggest asset probably is our ability to earn a living, right? Yep. So if that stops, then everything else is going to stop and go backwards. So for me, that focus on your people's income and helping them protect that and ring fence it just in case is probably a conversation that we should all be having. And I'm pleased to say we are. We know income protection's definitely rising and rising fast, but there's still a long way to go. There's a long way to go.
And it's interesting just reflecting as we're speaking about this also, because I guess if we're spending a lot of time on that diversification, on the stock market crash, that recovery, if you look at the cycles of the economy and what's going on, it recovers, doesn't it? But as you've just said, some people's income won't ever recover. No. And actually, if you've lost that completely, that is a dead stop in that financial planning. That isn't going there. There's not an option then to get out of that in that recovery plan, isn't it?
It's just lovely to have that option of future-proofing, like as an advisor thinking, right, okay, I haven't really got the time or the specialism to commit to that. Yeah. What a lovely way to refer to an organisation, trusted partner that really looks after their clients.
Exactly, who's going to work alongside you and help you do the right thing. Exactly. So,
definitely.
Yeah. So I'd encourage any wealth advisor, any mortgage advisor, if you're walking past these conversations, you know it, and if you are, then find a relationship where you've got that trust and they're going to do the right thing and they'll treat them as well as you do, and it can work really, really well.
What would be your, to round off, David, what would be your top tip if it's whether it's a protection advisor listener or a wealth advisor, what would be your kind of one tip that you'd want to share based on your own journey and experience?
So I guess it's try and look at the world, there's so many wills, try and look at the world through your client's eyes. protection shouldn't be a tick box exercise. It should be a lot more than that. It's a lot deeper than that. So look at the world through your client's eyes and imagine what would happen and the impact on their loved ones if you have arranged the right thing, or if you haven't, just try and see what the impact is. Because most people, when you ask them the right questions, they want to protect the ones they love the most, right? So make sure you're playing a key part in that, and also protecting the assets that they've spent so many years trying to accumulate. So those two things. But for me, first of all, it's about the family and about the income. And just making sure that, my kids are 16 and 18, they've got university and college and all this stuff ahead of them and buying houses maybe and all this sort of stuff. So I want to make sure if something happened to me, that it doesn't stop when they're 21, that these days it goes on beyond that. So I'd want to make sure they can have the lives that I'd be able to give them if I was around. So that's what.
Got an expensive few years coming up, David, then potentially.
It's all been expensive.
Thank you so much.
You've got this to look forward to.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. But no, thank you so much. I think that's been really inspiring. I think anyone who's looking at whether they write a referral or even how to just start doing either one of those, I think that's probably given them some inspiration and reassurance. It's
just a compelling story of the success and also why all advisors should be considering protection seriously. Put yourself in your client's eyes and in your client's world.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.